Coming up next, it's a very important episode, and I mean that, of Live from My Office. But first, a big thank you to our sponsor, Apt Electronics and Appliances, pleasing people since 1936. And that's the reason they've been around so long. Customer service isn't an accident, isn't a once-in-a-while thing. It's the rule. And Apt also is here and will always be here because they're your number one destinations for the greatest selection of quality appliances. Let's talk about Bosch for a second. Bosch offers a full range of kitchen appliances that deliver superior precision performance, and you can own the kitchen like a Bosch. Their dishwashers have something called crystal dry technology. Gives you the ultimate clean and dry, even with plastics. And sleek refrigerators, too, with VitaFresh technology. That's going to keep your food fresh up to 3 times as long as refrigerators that don't have VitaFresh. I feel bad for those refrigerators. Bosch also has all-in-one ovens. These ovens have an air fry combination built in. All your favorite appliances built into one for the ultimate cooking versatility. And with an enduring commitment to quality and design, Bosch makes kitchen appliances that are invented for life. Thoughtful design in every detail of every Bosch appliance. It's the kind of quality that is both lasting and noticeable, and you are going to love it. Shop quality Bosch appliances at Apt for free and home delivery, professional installation, complete satisfaction. Shop at Apt, pleasing people since 1936. And don't forget, use the promo code Cochran25, Cochran 25. That's Cochran25 for $25 off your next purchase at Apt. Hey, it's Steve Cochran, and welcome to Live from My Office. I mentioned in the preamble, this is an important episode because it deals with something that cuts pretty close to the bone to me and probably to you as well, and that's addiction. I come from a family of addicts and a big brother who is about to celebrate 22 years of sobriety when I doubted he would make 30, 40, or 50 years old. Mickey is 65, a couple of years older than me. But he is my hero, and he has special needs. I was told by many he probably couldn't wrap his head because of his difficulties around the cure. But guess what? He did it because addiction, as I mentioned in this interview you're going to hear today, it doesn't care whether you are fully equipped or less than fully equipped by definition. It doesn't care if you have money or don't have money. The key is you have to want to live. Mickey made that decision. And so did one of my guests today. This is a cool story. This is about a dad and a son, the life of the dad, and the new relationship with the son. The son is Jarrett Burton. Full disclosure, Jarrett was an intern for me some 20 years ago at WGN Radio in Chicago, and he was part of the staff for some time as well. When he left, I knew he was struggling, but I lost contact with him. The good news is, he's now celebrating several years of sobriety, and he pays it forward every day with his job at Serenity House, where he talks to others about how to avoid the path that he ended up on, if possible, or to turn them around and help them save their lives. His dad is Keith Burton, and the book is called Shadows of Sobriety. We talk a lot about it in the interview, so I'm going to save it for that. But Keith has his own story that I can also identify with a difficult childhood of his own, and it's just a really cool thing. So I'm glad you're here, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing it and hopefully learn something about it, though some of it may be uncomfortable for you. In the meantime, you go to CochranShow.com. You can keep up with everything I'm up to, and you can also get all the past episodes of Live from My Office. We also put the new Substack up there. You can subscribe to Live from My Office everywhere podcasts are. You can go to Substack.com, search my name, and you can subscribe to my Substack. There's a new one going up in a few days. And we'll also put information about live shows. And I'm working on my taxes. I may just post my tax return this weekend. All right, look, I'm glad you're here, as I mentioned. I thank Apt Electronics for sponsoring this effort. So let's take one more break, and then when we come back, actually, you know what? I'm going to switch that up. Let's go to the interview first, And then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about my friends at App and talk about the interview you're about to hear right now. This is about you. This is about me. This is about all of us. If you ever loved somebody who was struggling, or if you're maybe that person that is struggling now, I think you're going to get something out of this. Keith Burton and Jarrett Burton, father and son. Again, Shadows of Sobriety is the book, and you're listening to Live from My Office, and I'm glad you're here. Sometimes we take a turn here on Live from My Office, which is important more than funny. And sometimes we take a turn that's important more than topical. I would argue that this is always topical. Families dealing with issues of sobriety is not exactly an unusual thing. And maybe it's you or maybe it's somebody you love. But I'm very happy to have Keith Burton and Jarrett Burton, his son, with me today to talk about Keith's book, Shadows of Sobriety, A Journey of Self-Discovery and Healing specifically of Family Legacy. You get a shot of that there. And welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be with you.
Yes.
Jarrett, full disclosure, when you worked for me at WGN Radio, I was the best boss you ever had.
Yes, 100%. And actually, I'll go ahead and say, I think I started as your intern on your show, under the tutelage of the great Rick O'Connor, who was your producer at the time. And I was an intern, and then I just kind of never left until they chucked me out. So it was a nice journey.
Small world stuff, by the way, but people will remember Rick O'Connor's name if they're listening to this. And Rick is now living in Tokyo, and he went to South Korea to be a teacher and loved the Asian culture so much he decided to stay. And I'll tell him you said hello.
Yeah, as a like a 6'4" Irish guy with red hair, I'm sure he sticks out like a sore thumb in Tokyo.
It's actually, Keith, you might be able to speak to this. It's a good sociological experiment. American women love accents, including the tough guy from Rhode Island accent. Apparently, the Rhode Island accent must play in Japan as well.
Boy. That's a good
that. All right, so let me start with you, Keith. A journey of self-discovery and healing of family legacy. We talked a little bit before we started this. I always tell people I could play dysfunctional family tennis with just about anybody, and match bad incident for bad incident. My father was 40 when I was adopted, and he born in 1921. He came from an era where you didn't admit you had hurt. You didn't admit you had problems. You drank. And he was the world's greatest guy when he was sober and an absolute animal when he was drunk. And things in our family spun out from that. And all of my mother's brothers had similar issues. Or I should say 2 of the 3 did. So it's a tough way to grow up. And I think maybe we start there because you obviously deal with that in this book, Shadows of Sobriety. Talk about your childhood a bit.
Steve, I wrote this book because I had a need to go through the healing process, as I mentioned to you. And when I started writing it, I went back into my memories, and I had so many memories through the years of what we'd experienced. I have 3 sisters and a brother. I often said that we acted in a tragic play basically every night. We were actors in a play, acting out a script that we never wrote, and a play that we didn't intend or want to be a part of. And that was our life over many years. My father came home from the Pacific. He was a changed man when he came home. He never talked about his time in the Second War until the day my mother died, when he did have a conversation with me about it. But it totally changed his life, that and some events that happened in our family, which I write about. But it really had a dramatic effect on who we were and how we lived our lives. And most importantly, the fact that he drank the entire time of his life until the time he died, very heavily as an alcoholic. That's the subject that I wrote about in the book. But this is not a book about alcoholism. This is a book about addiction and the effect and the aftermath that it has on families that suffer very often through these circumstances. It forever changed the life of my sisters. I was estranged from my sisters for a number of years. My brother and I are very close. He's a pastor in Tennessee, and I say that he survived because he was on the tail end of the storm. He was not in the early portion of that. but my two older sisters and I were, and we suffered many nights with the violence that my dad and mother experienced together. And I know that you would understand that. And it wasn't just verbal violence; it was physical violence as well, and it was very difficult to deal with. I wrote the book not just for myself, but I wrote it for others who don't have a voice. I know that you understand that concept too.
Sure,
Very
of
often,
course.
what happens is that we mask or bury the pain that we've gone through and become competent imposters. We're very capable of doing the things out in the world that we need to do because we've taken care of our family members, we've taken care of our siblings, and done the things that were necessary and probably matured way too early. But the truth of it is, I never really had a family in the sense of growing up with the mother and father that were able to nurture me and guide me and teach me the kind of things that I would have enjoyed learning from them because of their own pain. So the healing process that others need is obviously the process I went through, and I've tried to give other people a voice for this. Interestingly, as I went through this, I'll have to tell you with Jarrett on the line, as a part of this conversation today, that I went to Jarrett and Jordan and Tyler, my own children, to tell them about my experiences. I wanted to do that before I wrote this book. And I did the same thing with my siblings, Steve, because I wrote about them, as you know, in the book pretty actively. And I wanted them to be,
Extensively, yeah.
yeah, I wanted them to be aware of what I was going to talk about, but also to get their feedback and their reactions to the same experiences that we went through. And every experience for me was very different for them. So I think it's important for us to understand that no matter how much we think others may have experienced things as we did, that they don't always do that, and they may have a totally different perspective.
The the legacy that gets paid forward or runs into a brick wall here gets repeated generation to generation. We all get to that fork in the road where if we have alcoholic parents or abusive parents, we'll take the same path, we'll self-medicate, and we'll head down a dark road until hopefully we find God, if that's your answer. It certainly was in mine, and find peace on some level as well. But the other side of that is the codependent side. That was the road that I walked. I always thought I could fix them. I always thought I could love them hard enough to fix them. You were in a unique place to have the struggles put upon you and choices that you made, and then to see your kids struggle as well. Talk about that.
That was it's a very good question that you asked. I was in a unique position because I couldn't fix my father's alcoholism. We tried for many years to do that. He was not going to change, and he was unwilling to go through the process. He'd been hospitalized twice for this, including at a place called Timberlawn in Dallas, which was known as the human salvage factory for the fact that they had taken in people trying to do that very thing and they were unsuccessful. My dad was just not a willing participant. So having experienced this with him and having vowed to myself, as Dr. Claudia Black says in her book, "It will never happen to you," that I would never have a life like that. And I would also take care of my children and make sure they had everything they needed to be successful. When Jarrett went through his own experiences, you remember, and we've talked about with his addiction, for me, it was, it was an opportunity to be supportive of him, to show him the kind of love that he would need, which I did, and Sue and I both did during that time, to help him weather that process as well as go through the treatment process. I knew it would be a long journey. Jarrett can talk about that as he discusses that today, but I do know this. I do know that very often, and you probably do too, that while our parents may be affected and our siblings may be affected, it may skip a generation. In my case, it skipped me. I never had the issue of any addiction or any alcohol problems, but Jarrett did. And so as a result, I think we have to be understand that these things change over time as you go through them. That's why there is a legacy that we have to look at, looking back as well as looking forward.
You talk about that in the book again extensively, but let me get Jarrett in here. Jarrett, you saved your own life. It's funny because my brother, who I've talked about regularly, people all the time come up to me and go, "It's so great what you did for your brother. It's so great what you did for your brother." The ultimate truth of an addiction to me and an addict to me is you have to want to live. You have to decide you don't want the life anymore and you have to want to live. And it's not because somebody loves you and somebody pulls you out. You certainly can find inspiration in others and take guidance from others, but you have to make the ultimate choice. So talk a little bit about your experience and how it's led to what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. So when you and I knew each other back in the WGN days when I was there, that was really on the kind of front end of when things started to get bad for me. I was kind of a late bloomer as far as kind of chronically drinking or using because I would hear stories from my dad when I was younger about that type of environment, and I knew that it was hereditary, and so I kind of purposely stayed away from alcohol and drugs for a while until I tried it for the first time, probably when I was around 18, and I realized I had an aptitude for drinking. Not only an aptitude for drinking, it kind of helped me to, I don't know, fix some things that I felt were wrong with me even at a young age. I was kind of a restless kid, irritable, didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. So when I finally took substances for the first time, it was like all that was fixed with one drink. And so I could see from an early age how tricky and dangerous it could be. But really where it got bad, Steve, was when I kind of got into substances and some of the heavier stuff, and opiates was my thing. So opioids was kind of opioids and alcohol specifically. When you and I knew each other, I was kind of holding it as best I could, holding it together. Over time, there's no such thing as a long-term successful drug addict. We try as best we can, but over time it just doesn't work. And so, Steve, over the better part of 15 years, I was in and out of treatment centers, and I tried moving across the country. I lived in LA for a bit. I thought if I just get out of
Right.
Chicago, then I moved back. So long story short, I was kind of in this revolving door of treatment and other things, and really not doing the necessary internal reflection on like what was making me do all of this stuff. And so it got to a point a few years ago where I had been kind of in and off of living on the street, living in Chicago that way, which is very, very traumatic experience in its own right. But I had managed to put together, Steve, like clawed together 2 or 3 years of sobriety time. This is back in about 2014. And in the middle of that, I was diagnosed with advanced stage 3 cancer. So I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. By the time they caught it, it had kind of already spread everywhere, which is a really, really it's a hell of a thing for anybody to hear. I think especially if you're an addict who's kind of white knuckling sobriety. And so that kind of sent me back down a really, really dark place to where I was back using. And it just got to a point where I realized, I beat the cancer, but I've still got this monkey on my back. Like, what am I doing?
Sure.
And so I realized that I was going to die if I didn't do something different. And so October 10th of 2018, went to treatment for knock on wood, hopefully the last time. Since then, I realized that I'm kind of good at working in this field, working with others, working with people who, have their own substance use issues. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been working for an organization called Serenity House Counseling out in Addison. So we work out of DuPage, and I've been working for them for the better part of the last 6 years. And you're right. That word miracle, I think you guys have both used it a couple of times, and I think truly in my case, that's what it was. I was kept here on this earth for a purpose, I hope, and the fact that I'm able to connect with my dad on this level now, especially once he's kind of done his own digging in his own history and internalized some of his own struggles, we understand each other better now, I
We
think,
do.
in a lot of different ways.
Steve, I just want to tell you a quick little story
Yeah,
here.
go ahead, sir.
I picked Jarrett up one morning in Naperville to go with me down to Iowa to pick up our golden retriever. And while he was with me, I said, Jarrett, we'll have a good 10 hours today. I want to hear everything from you that you'll tell me that I don't know at this point about your addiction. And so we talked about this for the better part of the day. And I didn't realize until that day that Jarrett had lived on the streets of Chicago off of Ashland Avenue for a period of time after he was no longer allowed to live above the bar when he was kicked out of his room up there by his roommates for stealing from them for drugs, that he was living in the L station on Ashland Avenue. And in the evening hours and the pre-dawn hours, he would transit from Midway Airport on the L and back to O'Hare. And he would do this every evening because he had nowhere to stay. And he was too proud at that time to call and to tell Sue and I about this, my wife and I about it. I asked him, I said, what caused you to make that change? What led you to that point?
Right.
And he said, one morning, Dad, it was 4:30 in the morning, and there were two people who got on the train going out to O'Hare, and I could see their shoes, the woman wearing high heels, the other man wearing dress shoes and a suit, and they sat across from me. And he said, I decided when they got up and they left, they moved away, that I had to do something. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, I didn't smell, I hadn't showered in so long. They got up to move because of that. And he said, I decided I could no longer live this life. So he came back to stay with us. We worked with him through that time. And it's just been really, it has been a miracle. It's been a blessing that he's been able to overcome this. But I credit Jarrett and I credit our faith and his faith in being able to do this, because it's almost impossible, as you know, with addiction to overcome these issues. But I'm very proud of his work. I'm very proud of what he's doing.
Well, as you should be. And I was not aware of the cancer diagnosis, and you are a miracle. The idea, and again, I come from a religious, spiritual background in this, but yeah, God picks you and says, "No, not yet, not yet. I don't need you up here. I need you down there." So I think you're on the exact path and right where you should be. It's an interesting thing, though, in the father-son relationships here, to go through what your dad went through and to go through what I went through with my father. You don't want to put that on your son or your daughter, but in specific to fathers and sons. But yet, Keith, you could speak to this. I know that I had not dealt with not just the hurt of it because I was taking care of everybody else. I was really pissed off.
Yeah.
I didn't have a childhood, and I was mad, and I picked a very selfish profession. Choosing a public life, it's all about you. So in all of that, I thought, oh, I'm a fabulous dad, and I think I was pretty good at it, but I certainly missed the mark a little bit. So this question is for both of you.
Okay.
Were you, prior to that car trip, in denial about Jarrett? And Jarrett, how did you see your dad during those years? Did he fail you or did you fail him? How do you break that down?
Jared, I'll let you talk on that one first.
Sure. So I never put any of the blame on my parents or family members or anything. I truly know that they were doing the best they could with what they knew. So I'm the oldest of three, and I'm also the oldest of three with the only one who has a substance use issue. So I really was, the first to go through a lot of things, and so they were doing the best they could. While my mother also grew up in a household where alcoholism was just around, and it's they were probably trying to process their own feelings while finding the best way to support me. That's the other thing that I run into with parents now that I work with of kids who are struggling, which is they want to help and they just don't know the best way to do it. They don't know if it's overcompensating or they're undercompensating, and so it's to find a happy medium is tough. But also, I really didn't do my part in trying to best break down to them what it was that I was dealing with. And I think that I was doing that because I knew how much hurt they went through when they were younger, and I really didn't want to put that back on them. But it's also, like I said, it's part of a lack of an education on my part. And they did the best they could. Do we miss the mark? Of course, we always do. I missed the mark as a son. I missed the mark as somebody who just shut them out when I was going through that. But yeah, that car ride and others went a long way in helping us to better understand each other
I
and
can't
have a
tell you
language to share.
how proud I am of you, but the bond that you have with your dad now, and some of that certainly through the courage, Keith, of writing this book. And again, the book is called Shadows of Sobriety. Where do we get it, by the way?
That title, by the way, you can get it at Amazon, you get it at Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy a book, and you can also get it as an audiobook if you don't get the ebook or the print book.
Okay.
When I selected that title, Shadows of Sobriety, there is a bright line that exists, as you know, Steve, between sobriety and addiction. There is a bright line, and we often talk about that. But what we don't talk about are the shadows that we live in. You lived in those shadows. I've lived in those
Absolutely.
shadows. And those shadows for us are the darker side, the secrets and the sacrifices that we go through very often to do the things that we do. I'm very much like you in the sense that I said, I will never have my children live the life that I did. I don't want them to ever know these things. And I think we all want to be a good father, a good mother, good parents. And I sought to do all of those things. I also think that I sought not to communicate things that I should have very early on to them about my life and about who I was. Those were the secrets that I kept guarded. And one of the reasons I wrote this book is that I want more people to have a voice, to be able to be open the way you are being open. And I'm being open now about what we experienced and what the truth is. Resilience, recovery, those things really cannot be shrouded in secrecy. They have to be out in the open. And the only way we can do that is to have these conversations that we're having now and to have a tool like this particular book where people can go through it and they can see themselves. I can tell you, since it's come out in January, I've had many, many people who've written me, who've called me, who've talked to me about their own experience. 1 in 5 people in any situation, wherever we are in an office or in a community, 1 in 5 grew up with a parent or a loved one who was an alcoholic or addicted. And so we know that's
Sure.
millions of people. And as a result, there are millions of people who've been affected. Where do they go to have these conversations? What do they do to address these issues? Unless you can find a very wise counselor or a friend like you who we can have a conversation with about this because of our shared understanding of it, it's very challenging to do. I have the great fortune of having my son who I can have this conversation with, and you're right. We have a completely different relationship now than we did even 5 years ago. And it's a result of just our openness together and what we've been through. I don't think it's a matter of age or tenure or anything. I think it's just we're now talking about things that we didn't in the past, and I'm so very glad and grateful to God that we're doing that.
Yeah, and that's part of the miracle as far as I'm concerned. By the way, in this book, I don't think I've ever seen so many endorsements. You could do an entire book just of the endorsements of the book you wrote.
Thank you, Steve.
And you mentioned Claudia Black, Dr. Claudia Black, that it will never happen to me piece doesn't deal with the side that we didn't deal with as codependents. So when Jarrett's in that car ride and he tells you he was homeless for a piece as a dad, I can't imagine what that must have felt like for you.
I cried. I mean, it made me feel very sad. I mean, I grew up in a household, Steve, where we lived by 3 rules: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. We just simply would not disclose these things, even to each other. And as I may have said earlier, we were on this stage acting out this play, and each of us have a different perspective or will say different things to each other. I'm grateful this past September, I went and met with my sister who lives in San Antonio. We had a very open conversation. We talked about things that we had never discussed before. She was the sister that I loved, and I said this in the book because of our relationship during all those very turbulent nights that we went through. My brother and I are very close, and we have these conversations. He experienced things differently than I did. But what common holds us together as a common bond is the resilience that we formed out of this. I think that's important. That's what you did, and that's what many others do. They struggle forward, and they find a path forward, and they do it through their faith, and they do that through the relationships that they form with others. But we have to be open with others about what we've gone through.
Were you, I mentioned how unaccepting I might have been of my own anger because I was so busy taking care of everybody else. Was there a point in your life where you realized I've got to deal with it and that's real?
Yes, I did. Because, Steve, for better or worse, I was affected physically as I went through these different times in my life when I was a teenager, again, when I was a young adult as a professional, and then more recently when my wife was ill back in 2022. I had panic attacks again. I had these over a period of time when they would just simply erupt. And I realized they were as a result of what I was bearing. I was wearing a mask. I was not openly sharing these feelings. And so it was an issue for me. You mentioned anger. I had anger. I had resentment. I had guilt over the things that happened, feeling maybe I could have done more to change those things. And in truth, it was not me. It was not me. I was a victim of those circumstances. And I learned that. I had to learn that the hard way through counseling. But yes, I felt all of those things as well, and I wish I could have made a difference. When my dad was near the end of his life, I sat with him when my mother had passed away, and he then finally told me about his time in the Second War on the atoll of Ulithi, which was a very not even known outpost in the in the war. And during that time, he told me about his experiences. I think he was deeply affected by these experiences and what he saw in the war. But like so many from that period, and perhaps like your own father, he could not talk about these things. He was never really the father that we
talked to his guys. He talked to the guys who served.
Yeah.
The only things I knew from it were things I'd literally sneak into the room next to him so I could hear them as they were playing euchre and hear some of these stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So absolutely amazing. In the book Shadows of Sobriety, you talk about defining good. Explain that a little deeper.
Yeah, good for me. It's an interesting concept. It came up originally with the CEO of a company I'm working with over at that time in the Persian Gulf, and he asked me what does good look like? And very often, probably for you and others who are listening today, will say the same thing. What is good? What does it mean? For me, good was what I saw early on with my parents when they taught Sunday school, when they were very involved in the church that we were a part of and members of, when they were in the community, when they were loving to their children, when they were doing things with us to show the way as parents. That to me was defining good. And I had that to use as the mirror through which I looked at my own life and thought, why did I not see good more? Why did I not see these kind of relationships more? Things just turned, and I didn't experience good in the way that I had when I was younger. So I think many of us have this idea that life should be idyllic. But for people like us who go through the problems of seeing alcoholism in their family or addiction, it's hard to define good because you don't experience it. You experience violence, you experience pain. In some cases, for me, as I mentioned in the book, pain and love were inseparable. They were the same as we went through many of the days that we experienced, and we never had really any peace. And that was the issue that I was most taken by.
You know, Jarrett, your dad also writes about things that saved you. In your work at Serenity House, you'll find in the business you're now in, there's a lot of people that have the theory there is that hit bottom point, and something will happen at the hit bottom point, and that's what saved you. But speak to whether it was the car ride or other things, because I think it's really interesting to note that on that train ride, the fact that you still had that piece of you by way of self-esteem, that you were embarrassed that you hadn't showered, that was a key point. And I think people hearing this who are struggling with addiction, they can get something out of your journey.
Yeah, you mentioned the hitting bottom. I think that is interesting. It's not a cliche because it's a true thing that happens, but you find that a lot of us who are chronic substance users, we talk about rearranging our bottoms. So each time you feel like you hit your rock bottom, you can go a little bit further down. And that was my case and a lot of the case for a lot of others that I've known and worked with. What I say is I was beaten into a state of reasonableness. Like I had,
Great
kicked
phrase.
yeah, I had kind of kicked my own ass enough for long enough that the I was really looking down the barrel of it, and I thought, if I don't make a change now, I'm not going to have too many more opportunities. And the one thing though that I did differently, this is what's important when I tell people, how I did it. What it did differently from all those dozens of times I tried before was I was willing to listen to suggestion. I think that's what trips up a lot of people in recovery, is that, by and large, addicts are self-absorbed, people, and that's like our defect. And so we drink and use to kind of cover up those things. But it keeps us from listening to suggestion. So when people would tell me, hey, you should go live in a sober living home, I was not interested in hearing anything about that. Or when, hey, maybe you should go check out Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. These things that I would avoid doing because people were telling me, I tried doing those things. And it's a novel concept because it started to work. And then the longer I did those things, the other really, really key thing, and I tell people this all the time, especially in early recovery, is finding your like accountability network, your accountability partners, some type of culture that you can build around yourself. So whether that is like recovery programs, whether that's, like myself and others who kind of like work in the field and help build recovery culture in our area based on what we see, you cannot do it alone. Everyone who I've seen try to do it alone, the strong silent type, it almost never works. So you're going to have to find those champions. You're going to have to find those allies. And then you help the next guy up. And I think that's what's kept me sober, Steve, is being in a position to help the people who are struggling every bit as I did just 6 years ago.
It's another fascinating piece of this. And I spoke to another friend who, Jarrett, you might remember, Patty Steele. She was a huge deal on the radio in New York City for years and very wealthy because she was very successful. She and her husband as well. And their oldest son nearly died, dried out 5 times. And I've heard as many as 7 could be the average before you finally get it. But the fact is you got it eventually. But the interesting thing to me was my brother, who's also adopted, and we grew up in the same home, adopted from different parents. But in the meantime, my father was a blue collar, hardworking machinist, never made more than 25 grand a year, but brought home the bacon. Was that the old phrase?
Yep.
But he paid the bills and he did what he thought a man should do, and then drank himself into oblivion from Friday night till Sunday night.
Yep.
So I think the message I'd love for people to get from this conversation is twofold as well. One is alcohol and drugs don't care. They don't care if your family loves you. They don't care if you're rich. They don't care if you're poor. They don't care if you're damaged. They don't care if you have special needs. Addiction can hit everybody, and everybody can get that cure if they choose to chase it the way my brother did and the way you haven't. I got to tell you, dude, I can't tell you how proud I am of you.
Thank you, Steve, for saying that.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that Gerald will remember his mother and I both told him after he recovered, and we told him along the way that the prayer we always had for Jarrett was that Christ would take him at his lowest point and bring him back. And that lowest point was when he was on that L moving back and forth between Midway and O'Hare every night in the pre-dawn hours. And he did that. There's a woman that I worked with, Steve, for 25 years in my parent company of my organization I work with. And when I asked her if she would endorse my book and work with me, she said, I have to tell you something. I've never told anyone this. I've been sober now for 29 years. 29 years. And she said, I really didn't want to share that with anyone. And I said, I'm really honored that you're telling me. And she said, I'm telling you because I can tell you. Okay. Just like you and I are having the conversation about your life and Jared's talking about his. And I found this with so many people who've stepped up and now are having these conversations. I think we all want to have a place to have these conversations, just like you're allowing us to do today. And it's a struggle for so many people to do this. It's about empathy. It's about understanding. It's about people who are willing to not just hear us, but to truly listen to what we're saying. And I think that's why it does not work in so many cases. And that's why so many people struggle with it. But I'm incredibly proud of Jarrett. He and I talk about these issues regularly. And he's done a wonderful job first of all, he's a wonderful son, but he's done a wonderful job at Serenity House and has built so many programs for them and put such passion behind what he's doing because he believes in that. He's been through this and he understands the power of recovery in the way that we're talking about today.
Hey, you're saving lives and changing lives every day, so you should be proud of that. But go a little deeper on that. What is your life like today when you're not at Serenity House?
So my life is completely different. 100%. Never would have guessed it 6 years ago. Now outside of work, I live a pretty peaceful, quiet existence, which coming off the tail end of 15, 20 years of chaos is exactly what I want. I have, great friends in my life. I have, hobbies and interests and things that aren't related to, finding ways to get money to buy drugs. That's
Sure.
the other thing a lot of people don't think about is when you're in active addiction, that is your full-time job. And it is such a whirlwind, chaotic existence that like having some peace and quiet is a beautiful thing. My big passion, Steve, is harm reduction work and finding ways that we, can keep overdoses, especially fatal overdoses, down. I'm a huge evangelist for things like Narcan, but also different types of testing strips, safe needle usage. This is a big project we've been working on to get that type of stuff off the ground in DuPage County, because I think there's still a lot of hesitancy around harm reduction, even if it's just things like keeping people from dying from overdoses. I think there's a certain percentage of folks who look at that as like enabling. And so that is for the past few years been truly like my passion project out here in life and in work. But yeah, that's kind of what my life looks like nowadays.
Jared's
Everybody
like,
deserves a chance to save their own lives, and it would be a horrendous mistake to not use the technology and the advancements we've had to save those lives until they can take that step to save their own. And I'll have that argument with anybody, anytime. Keith, you carved out a very successful career and a family, and I'm sure from outside, people probably didn't know that you had struggles unless you shared your secrets, as you put them, with your closest friends. What do you want to say about secrets in regards to the book and in
Hmm.
regards how men our age should live their lives?
Steve, for 2 years I worked in Manhattan, and I would leave Chicago I would leave my house at 3:30 in the morning, go to O'Hare, and fly out at 5 in the morning to go to Manhattan every week. And on those flights, I very often found myself thinking about my life and where it was, but also the things that I'd not resolved that it related to my past. And one of the issues that came back into my mind always was being the competent imposter. I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, but it's an important one because very
I think
often
so too. Yeah.
I think for those of us who have been successful, who've been through these kind of issues with families that have been in turmoil from alcohol abuse or addiction, we struggle to be able to make our way forward to feel that we really are capable of doing the things that we've done. I had an incredibly successful career, and I still do. And I've enjoyed doing all the things that I've done, but very often I find myself saying, was that really me doing those things? Because again of the doubt and some of my own confidence that was affected during that time. The other issue that that I've known through this time is that I wore the mask when I was with people that I worked very closely with, many of them over 10, 15 years. They didn't know the true me. When I wrote the book and I asked one of my colleagues to endorse it, he called me on the phone and said, I've known you for 40 years, but I really have never known you. Until I read this book, I didn't know that you experienced these things, but now having read it, it makes sense to me. It is who you are with your empathy, with your care for other people, who you are. I understand now why you are the way you are. And I think that happens. It may have happened for you. I know it happens for other people as well, that we just don't share. We wear the mask. We hide behind a facade of being well and being perfect and good. And we're not that. We're not that. We need to be the people that we really are and show that face to other people.
I'm a big believer in counseling and therapy and have been my entire adult life. I think it's the health club for your head and your heart that everybody, ought to be taking part in. But what you just said brings to mind a men's group. It's really the only men's group I was ever involved in. It was over the summer over the course of 8 weeks. And our marriage was struggling. I was certainly struggling. I've admitted to clinical depression forever.
Yep.
But there's medicine for that too, and it's perfectly fine to use it as long as with the therapy. But
Yep.
in this circle of 8 men, all about our age again, there was one guy that was a whiner. It was everybody else's fault, and if he talked and he talked a lot, it was bitching about what other people had done. And it's the type of stuff Jarrett hears every day with folks looking for an excuse to keep drinking, not stop drinking, or why they're there in the first place. So we're down to our final 10 minutes of the final session, 8 weeks in. And sitting across from me is a guy that's a little bit older, and he literally has not said a word for 8 weeks. And he's listened to the guy whine, and he's, been supportive of the others just in the way he looks at us and other things. And the guy said one too many things, and the old guy who didn't talk looked at him and goes, I am so sick of your bullshit. And it was like a thunderclap in the room. And he simply said, it's a road, it's a journey. And he said, I have terminal cancer. He said, if we do this next summer, I may not be here. But until the day they close the lid, I'm going to keep trying to get better. And I think it was such a strong message because it's really the story of this, isn't it, Jared?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the amount of times it takes, Steve. Like, I remember the number used to be 8, and I thought that was high. I've heard, like you said, as high as a dozen sometimes attempts at
Wow.
treatment before someone sticks. Now, this is, multiple pathways. However you do it, just give it a shot. It's like you said, either it's therapy or maybe it's a residential treatment somewhere, or maybe it's just, finding a church you like, something to kind of steel yourself and give yourself something to lean on that isn't just yourself. Because when we're only accountable to ourselves, we're the best liars, you know?
Yeah,
So when it's
100%.
only ourselves that we're being accountable to, we tend to trip and fall. So finding that support system, spiritual and otherwise.
Keith Burton, what do you want? If people get anything out of your book, and they'll get a lot, but I want them to get your book, Shadows of Sobriety. And if there's one thing you really hope is something they'll walk away with when they talk about the book to other people, what would it be?
I would like people to read this book and to, whether they have gone through an issue that relates to alcoholism, addiction, whatever it may be, or even some other form of trauma. And by the way, I was at my brother's church in Nashville 2 weekends ago, and a man came up to me and he told me while he did not experience alcoholism, he was molested when he was younger. He and his cousin both were molested. And he's lived with this trauma for all of the years and has found it incredibly difficult. This gave him voice. What I hope will happen, Steve, will be that people feel they will have a voice to have a conversation with me or someone else that they can trust to talk about the issues that they've had to address and endure, and to frankly begin the process of healing until we can be open with people and overcome secrecy. We can't do that. So we have to be willing to do that. And that is my hope that people will really do this. What came for me out of it, and certainly what came for you, I know that, and seeing you and seeing you through the years, is resilience. Nothing ever held me back. I felt like no matter what I dealt with, that Christ was there for me in my life. My faith was very important to me. And I was going to overcome these things no matter what. And prayer helped me to do that, but also relationships with strong mentors and other guides. I didn't have that in my father, but I had other people around me who were strong guides for me and what I did. So I think surrounding yourself with the right people, as you've said, whether it's at men's group or in the church community or wherever you may be, is important, but also being willing to begin developing your own voice for these issues rather than holding these things silent.
And I guess I'd also say that I have so much more confidence in Jarrett's generation of men than in our own, because masculinity was defined by those of us over 60
Yeah,
as keeping it to ourselves
that's
and
right.
walking it off. Maybe you tell a friend, but if you admitted you were hurting, you were a wimp. You were, you suck it up, buttercup. That was kind of the way you were expected to live. And what we know, Jarrett, and I'm sure this is part of your message to those that come to you at Serenity House, is the greatest courage you have is admitting you need help.
That's the first step for a reason, and it's the hardest step for a lot of people to take. It's a plunge, but just know that whatever it is you're going through, substance use wise, people have been through it and they've gone out the other end. And there is hope for people out there. And yeah, you can do it. You can do it out here in DuPage County. It's available for you.
Everything too that I don't want to lose sight of in shadows of sobriety. This is not, as you said, a book for alcoholics or addicts. It deals with all of that, but for people that feel emotionally abused in their life or have chronic depression or whatever the case may be, I think you're getting an awful lot out of this book. And also, I don't want to lead people astray here either. It's not a book for men; it's a book for everybody.
That's right. It's a book for everybody. And interestingly enough, generation-wise, I've had several people who've written me who are younger professionals in the business coming up, one including a colonel in the Marines who's fairly young, who wrote me a note talking to me about what he and his mother experienced with his father and how she had to live her life without him because of his addiction issues and what he's been through and how this book spoke to him. So it cuts across generations in every way. And we know this issue, no matter where we are, is an important issue for us to address.
Since you come from this business of entertainment, in quotes,
Yeah.
information and entertainment, when you have a hit book, you got to write another one. You do know what the next one's going to be?
I had someone ask me that from a company in Chicago today. Actually just did had a conversation with a group of employees there, and they said, "What will you write about next?" And I said, "It's too early for me. I'm still dealing with going through the pains of the process of this book." And for me, Steve, it was painful because I had to go back and you'll understand this. I had to go back and relive a lot of these experiences. I had to go back and put myself in those places. And what's interesting for me is that I never forgot those memories. Perhaps you have those same memories as well. You can still
100%.
see them and feel them and sense them and what they were. I can go back to those moments when there were challenging times in the pre-dawn hours with my mom and dad, see myself there in those circumstances when it was violent, intervening in those situations. And, it's important to know that when you're going through these kind of things, that you can be a storyteller for other people. That's part of what I did with this book, Steve, is to use storytelling, my work as a journalist, to be able to package this in a way that I could share my experiences in my life in ways that other people could see themselves or see evidence of the things that they need to address for themselves.
My brother, as I mentioned, 22 years sober this year, and special needs. When he first got sober, I was very concerned about him, and I spoke with his friends and people that had gotten him into AA. And I said, well, he lives a block from a bar. Does he need to move away?
Yeah.
When he goes to the grocery store used to be the reason to go to the grocery store was to get beer, not to get food. And a guy looked at me and he said, if he sits in a barber shop for 3 hours, he needs to be able to do it without getting a haircut. He said, that's how you know.
Wow.
He said, if the bar bothers him, if the grocery store bothers him, he's not there yet. And 22 years later, he's never fallen. So super proud of him. And I could just say to codependents who are listening out there, it took me a long time to learn this, but if you love somebody who's struggling like that, don't think for them, think of them. Don't make their decisions. Ask what help they need and try to guide them to the help that will benefit them. So, Jarrett, that's probably a good place to wrap this up. Serenity House, it's not going to cost you a thing to call. And if parents or loved ones have a concern and want to talk about how to approach someone they love who's an addict, I assume you handle all of that?
Yep, serenityhouse.com. We do residential men and women sober living. We do outpatient. We do peer support services. I'll come and pick you up, take you to coffee. You name it, we do it. Yeah, you can check out serenityhouse.com or DuPage Rosk. That's ROSC, DuPageRosk.org. And yeah, there's a lot of great ways to get involved. Great recovery community in DuPage County. Come see us.
Yeah, and that's the step. Take the first step and you'll likely take the second. Keith, you're a good man.
Steve, great to be with you. Always. Good to see you again.
Well, one more time, Shadows of Sobriety. You see the book over Keith's left shoulder. Jarrett, you come from show business. Thank God you got out of it.
I know.
Where can you get the book? Do the plug.
You can get the book at any Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com. Man, it's been a while, Steve. I got to work on my non-regional diction. But
Amazon and your
the Amazon
favorite bookstore.
and the favorite bookstores.
Google Play, Google Play Books.
Sure. And keep up the sermons for good, because we need both of you. And I think it's just a really cool story. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, great to see you again in any capacity. Glad to be here with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man. Thank you to Keith Burton. Thank you to Jarrett Burton for a moving, brutally honest story to be told. And it's appreciated very much. Before we go any further, thank you as well to my friends at Apt Electronics. Hey, did you know that along with all the other stuff that Apt has, this amazing place, this place it's like an adult Disney World where you can go in and get everything your heart desires, including garage doors. What? What are you talking about, Steve? App has in-house specialists that will tailor custom doors to bring you home a brand new style, better protection, and a great look from the front. You know how people can be judgmental. They judge you on your looks, your house, on your looks. You don't want a beautiful home on the inside that's dinged up on the outside. You don't have to have it, because App can fix those garage doors. And again, they don't farm out this work. They have carefully hired in-house garage door specialists ready to tailor those garage doors to you. It's often the first thing your guests see, obviously, when they visit. So you want yours to look your best. From the custom garage door department at App, they offer service and maintenance, proper opener installation, that's a big deal, and interior garage storage options as well, which means two things: less fighting about your junk in the garage and more storage. Oh, it's a win-win. For free in-home delivery, professional installation, complete satisfaction, you can always shop at App. There's nobody better. App pleasing people since 1936. I'm going to close my eyes now and imagine your new garage doors. Oh, it's looking good. Let me just look to the left and the right. Yes, your neighbors are jealous. Of course they are. Get to App for all your needs and go check out those garage doors. Don't forget, you can get $25 off your next purchase when you use the promo code Cochran25 at app.com or in the store if you like. It's Apt Electronics, pleasing people since 1936. All right, so as we continue here for a second, I want to thank Keith. I want to thank Jarrett as well. I want you to get the book. It's called Shadows of Sobriety. You can get it at your favorite bookstore. You can get it at Amazon as well. Part of the discussion with my old friend Jarrett out of this is I'm really thrilled about his new work at Serenity House, where he's already won awards for what he does there every day. You go to serenityhouse.com, wherever you're listening, serenityhouse.com, and ask the questions you need to ask without judgment. You will get answers. And this may just be something that helps you come back to the rest of us and live the life you deserve to live. Shadows of Sobriety, Keith Burton's book. As you heard him say, I think he's going to be working on another one soon. But just brutally honest and a really brave thing to do to write about his life that way. And certainly Jarrett's bravery showed up in that interview too. Ross Cochran, I thank you, the executive producer of Live from My Office, for making sure everybody could hear this. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to my Substack as well at substack.com. Got a surprise coming for you soon. Something pretty cool. Could you imagine if you could wear the resistance? Oh, you don't know what I'm talking about yet, but you will. My name is Steve Cochran, and I thank you as always for listening to Live from My Office.
Thank you for listening to Live from My Office, a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event, and occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.